Happy Friday. The weekend is here on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We've got best bets coming up in a little bit. It's right before the holiday season. You probably already eyeing up your Black Friday deals. Do you need a little extra cash in your pocket? Ryan Snyder is going to help you out with that on the best bet segment of the show. But before that, the stuff that fans really want to know. What is the latest with Daniel Harris? He is a 4-star corner in the class of 2023. A huge get that Penn State might be able to land. Might be. We'll give you the twists and turns on the BWI Daily Edition. There he is, the man of the hour, Ryan Snyder, here for our Friday conversation. Ryan, how you doing?
Doing well, man. I am headed back on the road tonight, so looking forward to that. Heading to D.C. to watch Tony Rojas tonight. I've been meaning to see him for a while now, so excited to hit the road after we're done doing this. And I wanted to go to that Lake Braddock game really badly earlier in this year, but it was the same weekend, I believe, as Ohio State and or the Whiteout. But either way, it was one of those. I knew it was going to be a crazy busy weekend, so it was hard to go to DC, get to State College, and then do everything you have to do after those games. So I'm excited that there is a rematch between Fairfax and Lake Braddock, because that was a game I had circled, and it works a lot easier on the calendar this week.
Yeah, total tangent here, but you mentioned Tony Rojas. I was having a good conversation on the BWI message board, the Lions Den message board, which is a great reason to sign up for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for $10, and you get from now until next football season as part of your premium access. We were having a conversation about Tony Rojas, and really it was about 2023, right? And who can contribute next year? What might the lineup on defense look like, given a couple parts and pieces moving around? And I know we talk about 2022 and how there were a lot of pieces that were ready to contribute early. There's some guys in this class. I was going through the Rolodex in my head of defenders that might be able to contribute next year. Pretty impressive list. And Rojas with that 4 speed at linebacker, raw player, but with that speed and that size, he jumped to the top of my mind, and we'll see where that goes this offseason. So a lot to be excited about heading into December, and you're going to get way more information from Ryan on Tony after he goes to the game today. And then, of course, check out Blue White Illustrated here on YouTube for those highlights or whatever we decide to do with all of that information coming up next week. But you mentioned on Tuesday, this is a big news from last weekend, Daniel Harris. He decommitted from Georgia. There was some conversation that Penn State was a huge factor in that decision. What's happened since? Because this is this is the recruiting drama that everyone signs up for.
Right. It's other than my kids, what makes me pull my hair out at night sometimes. But so here's what I have a pick in for Daniel Harris, and there's no reason for me to change it. But I will note that our colleague Chad Simmons is probably talking to Harris as much or more than anyone. And Simmons earlier this week kind of backed off the Penn State talk a little bit, and was kind of mentioning that he thinks that this may still be Georgia's to lose. And I haven't spoke with Chad yet about it. He's traveling up to actually DC area tonight to watch IMG St. Francis. I wasn't able to catch up with him before we did this. But the one thing I know, or the one thing I understand at least about why he decommitted, a big part of it was just the amount of talent there, and he wants to get on the field, and he feels that he can get on the field quicker at Penn State, which is interesting to me. You don't see that often, but I've had multiple people kind of mention to me that that's one of the reasons he backed out. So look, Georgia absolutely wants him. Georgia has resources, and they will do whatever they've got to do from an NIL perspective to keep him there. I mean, this isn't a situation where he was processed or anything like that. I still feel confident with Penn State, or why I wouldn't change my pick back to Georgia or anything like that, is that I know he's discussed dates with the staff for potential commitments and things like that. I mean, there was talk earlier in the week that it could be this week. Now I'm hearing a little bit more maybe after Thanksgiving. So I'm not going to go into dates like that because they're not concrete or anything like that. But I just know that's been discussed with Penn State. So I think what's really clear right now is Georgia's working very hard to get him back because it wasn't like there was a falling out with the coaches or anything like that. I mean, this seems to be more about his relationship with Penn State, which is very, very positive, and then also, the depth that Georgia has at his position, and those seem to be the two main drivers in this. So I'll be curious to see where we're at in a week from now, because in a week from now, or excuse me, about more so 2 weeks from now, I would say, because Thanksgiving is going to, it's just always kind of a tricky week. But when we get to that week after, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's where I want to see where he's at, because that's kind of where I think it would make sense for him to commit to Penn State, if he gets my drift there. But if he's not, then that tells me that Georgia's in his ear a little bit more than what maybe Penn State thought he would be.
And go back to the original premise, I should say. Is he, just your observation, is he right to say that he could get on the field quickly at Penn State?
I think he's the most talented player, from a ranking perspective and things like that. But and there's some serious talent in that backfield. Now, I would say that the talent kind of pops to me a little bit more as at safety than at corner. But but also, like, let's be real, like Georgia has more talent at that position, or at least they've stacked over the last couple of years. So let's see. I can't pretend I have enough of a great feel for Georgia's situation to get an idea of what he's seeing there. I do feel like Penn State has plenty of talent there. I mean, Terry Smith's done a great job here in recent years stacking that talent, and he's got more of it coming in this year. I think King Mack will probably be playing there, and of course Elliott Washington as well. So we'll see. But there's no doubt that Daniel Harris would be. Sean and I talked about the other day. He would probably be the highest rated guy with Kalen King, depending on which rating you look at. But certainly the argument that he's the highest rated guy in recent years.
Yeah, and just, kind of spitballing about that topic, this is another thing we were talking about earlier today, is what does that cornerback room look like? And, Joey Porter Jr. sets a great template for what you would want out of your boundary corner. And here is a 6'2", 175-pound corner, and Penn State has played, at least in rotation, some young players throughout the years, going back to Kalen King being a part of the conversation last season. So it's an interesting conversation of position within the position, and of course then talent and him coming in and earning all of those things. So that's why it was an intriguing thing you just said, that is he right? This is the most talented Penn State secondary has been in a long time, and but here is a guy that genuinely has unique talents.
Yeah, right. It's not Georgia's secondary though. So we'll see. I like I said, I think it's kind of going to be quiet here for the next week. But I think when we get into that final week, November into December, I'll be digging on that. I'll be digging on that week. So be patient over the next week here. It's just Thanksgiving. This is always a weird week. But after that, I think we might start to get some answers.
What would his commitment, if he were to commit to the Nittany Lions, does that give them the potential of being back in the top 10?
No, not just him. I mean, they would need some other things to fall in place. And I don't. Just looking up the board, I still see, I think USC is still behind them. They could still potentially move up above Penn State. So I still see Penn State being 11th, 12th, something like that.
Which is, considering not a bad position to be, right? Especially with the composite rank of four-star talent they have in the class, which we've talked about regularly, basically in the summer, throughout the whole conversation of how many 4 stars do you need to get to that top 10 status, and they, that whole situation.
Stars. Yeah. You need 5 stars. You need 5-star players to be a top 10 class, unless you put up 15, 16, 17. I mean, right now, I think Florida is the only one. I wish I could pull it up real quick, but I think when I looked the other day, Florida was the only one who had no 5 stars, but was top 10. And I think they have 18 4 stars, I think is what it is, 17, 18, something like that. And Penn State, of course, has 14 right now with 6 3-star players. So I think they could still add another 1 or 2. But remember, USC's right behind them. They have 2 5-star players, and they're at that 20. I think they're at 20 as well. There you go, T-Frank. Look at you. Did I get my numbers right? Florida,
Let's see.
18 4 stars, yep. And then, like I said, you got USC there with 2 5-stars. And 9 4 stars, And, they still have room to add as well. And then you have Tennessee too. Tennessee's, they got all that collective money. You got A&M. I mean, think about A&M. I mean, obviously
they only have 11 commits here.
Right. So I still see Penn State falling outside of the top 10, but if they could finish 12th, and you look at just the depth of that 4-star talent, and obviously you compare it, you look at last year's class, and especially not even just last year's class, but all the playmakers that are making impacts. Of course, everybody knows Nick and K-Tron, but think about Denai and Zane and KJ Winston's out there. We're seeing Cam Miller get on the field. I mean, boy, there is some serious talent. This is a great class to come back with. And then, oh, by the way, the 2024 class, as I wrote about earlier this year, the region is on pace to be the best we've seen under James Franklin when it comes to 4-star talent. So there is a lot to be excited about from that perspective. They got to finish this class. I think they will. I mean, Dakari's the only one really taking visits anywhere, and that still seems to be okay for Penn State. So they should have too many issues with this class, and then they can really get 2024 rolling.
So 2 questions here, stemming off what you just said. I don't know if I've asked you this one yet. I've been thinking about it for a while now, but who's the freshman that surprised you that got on the field this year that you weren't expecting? Have we talked about this on air yet?
No. I mean, Drew Shelton maybe, just because he's an offensive lineman. I mean, I expected KJ Winston to play. I've been so high on KJ Winston for the longest time. I mean, I don't know if you remember when we started. He was the one I was writing about, of like, hey, this guy needs to be a 4-star and all that stuff. And that, I don't want to take the credit for that. That's more sources that I talked to saying, like, what is wrong with you guys? This is a 4-star player. But I mean, I think I'd go with Drew Shelton. I've always thought Drew had a high ceiling. I didn't think he could get on the field right away. But I would also say that, and obviously this is because of injury, but when I did see him at the late 7-on-7, so it was like late June. And then I saw him again actually in July too at a different camp. Boy, he looked physically really impressive. I mean, you were there, T. Frank. You saw him too.
Yeah.
So, I'd probably have to go with Drew because, I mean, think about it. We were, look at what we were hearing about Zane Durant. Denai was always going to get out there. You knew Nick and K-Tron would get out there. Actually, I guess maybe another guy too with Amari Evans. Evans getting on the field. Yeah. That's a good pick. So
that was the one I was going to bring up just because he played quarterback. Like how he made the transition, especially from spring, where I saw a lot of raw route running, to being a part of the conversation in camp and then being on the field for all of these games. Like, I don't think he's had the impact necessarily to say like that it was like a home run necessarily of him playing this year, but the fact that he's been out there and has been participating, that's a home run. That he was the guy that came out of that group to be the one that they trusted enough to be on the football field.
Right, for sure. So it's looks very positive moving forward. We got to finish this class up, and they got to get 2024 rolling. I'll be honest, I am a little surprised that they still have just one commit in 2024. That was one thing that if you would have told me that back in August, I probably would have been against that. So, but they'll go on their run in January and February, and they'll give me a reason to keep working every weekend in February or January and then in March. So
yeah, our significant others not going to love that part. I can already hear it.
At least February is a dead period now, man. It used to be, and we're done on this topic after this, but it used to be February was when they had a lot of junior days, but now that's at least a dead period, which coaches needed that as much as anybody, because it was one of the few months where you really had off. You had the July dead period, allowed you to go on vacation. But really, other than that, that was pretty much it. I guess August became a dead period too, to focus on practice. But at one point, there was no August dead period and there was no February dead period. July was the only one. And then you had 11 months of visits at any time. And fortunately, the NCAA changed that. But obviously, I'm grateful for it for my family. But I'm not the one. It's the coaches that really put in the crazy work. So. Anyway.
One last thing. I want to go through this and just update this since the last time you and I really looked at the top rankings and talked about this. Is there anything here that surprises you? Any jumps that you weren't expecting, or any teams that you that maybe you expected and now has come to fruition?
No, because Notre Dame has the new head coach bump, right? We see that. Who's the other one there? LSU, new head coach bump.
Florida.
You see that. And then Florida, new head coach bump. All three of them have brand new head coaches. Miami too, new head coach. So you see that pretty much every time, for a major program, not every school out there, but for most, elite programs like that, you see that bump there. So those would be the schools you point to, right? In Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas to some degree, I guess maybe a little bit you can point to, but of course they got Arch Manning, which I didn't. I mean, we always thought they were going to be a player, but at one point it didn't look like he was going to end up at Texas. So I think for the most part, the top 10 looks about right. I mean, Oregon has another new head coach. They're up there. So I think the schools that you would point to are also the schools that have new head coaches.
And just one last look here at Penn State. No five-star talent at this point, although Jayden Williams and Alex Birchmeyer make a strong case that either of them could be five-star talents. They have that level of skill. But 14 4-stars, 6 3-stars in the class of 2023. And as Ryan said, only one in the class of 2024 in Cooper Cousins, friend of the show, who is the one commit in that class. So just a quick look at that as we head into December.
Let me clarify one thing. I just want to make sure people, because I think people are still confused with the consensus and all that. So because Jayden Williams is a 5-star on 3,
right?
You know what I mean? So I want to just make people understand that Jayden's still a 5-star by our scouts, but these ratings are the consensus. So everything that goes into that is 24/7's info, ESPN's info, Rivals info, our info, all combined, and that's why you're not seeing a 5-star on there, even though our site and our scouts have Jayden Williams as a 5-star. So I just want to make sure people clarify that, because I still see people on Twitter all the time asking questions about that.
Well, I made that mistake here of conflating the two, so that's a very good point. Brenton Williams, the next thing up, talking about the coaching carousel this time of year, players decommitting, movement in the recruiting rankings. What do you know about Brenton Williams that you want to share?
Yeah, so Brenton's just I want to say a late riser, because he's had quite a few offers for a while now. He committed to Coastal Carolina, had a good relationship with their staff, and Coastal's obviously a up and coming G5 program, but he's really racked up some bigger offers here of late, and Penn State is one of them. Penn State just offered. Sean and I did a notebook, or actually Sean helped me with it, but I wrote a notebook on, I think it was Tuesday. And, we discussed Brenton Williams in it there as probably the next defensive end to get an offer. And then Penn State offered him on Thursday. Auburn is also one of the recent schools to offer. Missouri's in there. Georgia Tech's another one. But I really, this is still very early, but outside looking in, it feels like Auburn and Penn State. And of course, Auburn doesn't have a coach at the moment, so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out there. But he does have real interest in Auburn, from what I understand. What I'll be watching here moving forward is when he gets on campus. I know Penn State wants him to come on campus December, 9th to the 11th. That's when they want pretty much all their top guys coming. Whether he can make it that weekend or not, we'll see. I know they've discussed Michigan State, so next weekend with Brenton Williams, but it's going to really kind of depend on his schedule. So let's see how it plays out. Of course, I did kind of skip over the generics here. I should recap. He's a 6'4", 245-pound, 3-star defensive lineman from Opelika, Alabama. Opelika. I have no idea how to pronounce that.
I like Opelika. Let's go with that.
Opelika. I think that's where it is, but we'll see. Yeah. So we'll see. But he's certainly, I believe, a defensive end for Penn State, at least from what I've been told. They like him as a red shirt. Go ahead.
Any testing numbers, anything you have to share on that end? Because, on film looks incredibly impressive, and the length is obvious, the size is obvious, but then it always comes down to, the testing numbers and all the other things that can tell you kind of the story behind the story in recruiting, where you don't know who they're playing against.
Yeah, I've got nothing. I don't believe he's done any Under Armour camps. Definitely has never camped at Penn State, anything like that. He's just been a guy who really kind of started emerging on PSU's board, I'd say early October. They really started scouting him pretty hard after a good September, and he's just kind of progressed ever since. So I know that there is a wide swath of people in the Lash building that like him, and that's not always the case. I think people always think that it's a whole group decision. That's not. There's definitely people in Lash that are high on guys that others aren't. But everybody I've talked to has been speaking very highly of Brenton throughout the last week. That's why we put him in our notebook. And here he is getting the offer. So let's see when he gets on campus. They're shooting for December 9th to the 11th. I don't know if that's going to work with his schedule, though. So I do know Michigan State has been discussed. So he may be here next weekend. We'll find out here in a couple of days, really. By Tuesday, Wednesday, we should know.
Yeah. So a couple things that stick out to me here. 3-star in the on-3 consensus, 67th overall defensive lineman, 24th in Alabama. And then in the consensus ranking, he's the 1,126th player. So this is an unknown player. Like, that's what this tells me when you look at the film and see the height, weight, speed that clearly presents itself, but then you look at over here, bit of an unknown. One thing that I just want to point out, it's just something to note, not necessarily something that I'm making a decisive comment on. All of those plays that we just saw, none of them they were all unblocked. So that was the most up-to-date, most recent, I think, mid-season highlight reel. Without digging into the tape further, just know that, that to me is a huge part of the conversation, because you can get a sense of the athleticism and all those things, which is the basis of this. But when we talk about, the things that I like to dig into, translatability, learning curve, all that stuff, I have absolutely no idea based on the minute and a half, because there was not a lot to discern from that.
I was going to say, that's why schools like Penn State pay like thousands and thousands of dollars so they can access the huddle. Because so big time schools, there's this upper package for huddle where you get complete game film, right? So so everything that school puts on huddle for their players to review, Penn State gets kind of that access as well. So it's tens and tens of thousands of dollars. I don't think any of the four major sites have it. We still kind of go off of there's, don't get me wrong, you get a lot of full games on YouTube and that's FHS network. Yeah,
that's my December, January, and February, and also in the summer, is just trolling YouTube and some other sites that put up high school games and trying to find all that context and all that information. That was one thing about the pandemic that was great, was that there were a ton of games on YouTube and there were a ton of games on NHFS and all those places. Not so much anymore.
It has continued, though, compared to, and you're right, a lot of schools have dropped it. I don't want to, you're definitely right with that. But just compared to where it was before the pandemic, though, like I was never, ever regularly getting like full seasons. Like just a lot more schools have decided like, hey, all of our home games, we're just going to put them on this or that. And it's again, it has dropped off quite a bit, but it's still above where the low bar was in 2017, 2018, stuff like that. So it's been positive.
I appreciate the context. I appreciate the the back in my day.
Yeah.
So,
and one other thing.
Go ahead.
I've cut you off like 5 times today too. One other thing I would say with Brenton Williams' rating is, if you look at the consensus and the makeup of it, On3 has given him the most recent rating, and it's an 88, so it's a high 3-star. 24/7, I think, needs to still upgrade him. They have him as an 86, and then Rivals has him as a 5.5, which is pretty low on the 3-star scale. So don't be shocked at all if this all gets bumped up quite a bit with these Power 5 schools coming to call for Brenton Williams.
So last thing, and I know this is something that came from the On3 national recruiting team, but it is big news for Penn State football. 2024 quarterback Jayden Bradford. What's the status with him, and what's the situation there?
Yeah, so he announced his top 4 this week. Penn State was one of the schools. South Carolina, which is where he grew up. He's at IMG Academy now, but he grew up in South Carolina. They're one of the schools in there, along with NC State and Louisville. So what I'm really trying to figure out right now, for the longest time, I always thought, Jayden Bradford is your most realistic quarterback when comparing him to Jaden Davis, and I still believe that's the case. The X factor now, though, is Luke Kromenhoek, who, of course, is committed to Florida State, but has visited Penn State. He came up for the Minnesota game, the whiteout, earlier this year. So I get the impression that Kromenhoek, who's a 3-star still, but I feel pretty confident saying that's going to change here in the near future after the season he's having. I think he might be Yurchish's top target now compared to Bradford, but that doesn't mean Bradford wouldn't necessarily be a take. So Bradford kind of hasn't really said when he's going to commit. It's just kind of whenever he feels ready. I still think probably springtime makes sense there, but we'll see how it all plays out. But what'll be interesting to me is if Bradford wants to commit, what do they do there? And then do they still continue to pursue Kromenhoek? I think that they probably would seriously consider it, at least, especially if it's March and, you can't sign guys for pretty much not a whole year, but you know what I mean? What is that, 8-9 months? So we'll see how it plays out. But Kromenhoek kind of feels like he's the guy who's emerged at the top now. But Bradford's still very much in the mix.
Yeah, I just sorry I got distracted watching Bradford's highlights, and he's throwing out routes with anticipation, and I'm like, that's pretty good right there. Like you
No.
don't see that in high school too much. So Penn State's in a great position with a very good quarterback that, as you mentioned, is at IMG. So another good position. And you say, is this maybe Bradford is a take even if they got their top target? Would this be a 2-quarterback cycle? Is that something that you could see realistically happening?
If Vayer leaves, possibly, because Clifford's leaving, and if Vayer leaves, which I think there's a real chance he will, then you're down to 2 guys. Yeah, you'd probably prefer to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks than 3. So it's going to depend on a lot on Vayer, and obviously it's going to depend on Prebula's growth throughout the spring. I mean, there's so many things that trying to predict where they're going to be at in December 2023 is or December 2024. Wait. What is it, 2022? Yeah, December 2023, excuse me. Where they're at is hard to say. But yeah, if Christian leaves, I think it's something they'll certainly consider.
All right. Well, that is our update for recruiting. Now for my favorite part of the show. Not to say that the recruiting stuff in that 20-minute conversation wasn't awesome, but now we get to that.
I think this is going to be one of the best seasons Toledo's ever had. We'll do the official play will be -7.5 first half. Degenerate in me sometimes watches a little Hawaii, Stanford. I'll lay 12 with Stanford. Vanderbilt stinks. I had them last week against Notre Dame. That was a winner.
I very much want to make that I want to make that song my ringtone. That gets me so hyped for this segment.
It is catchy. I do find myself nodding at the end every time. So
here we go. This is our best bets of the week. Take us through what you got, starting with USC at UCLA, a rivalry game of Big Ten teams.
Yes, you threw me off there for a second. Oh.
I'm just getting everyone used to it. I'm just getting everyone in the rhythm.
So yeah, I think. Well, first off, I would say this: this is not a great week to be betting. I picked 4 games here. I'm really not incredibly confident on any of them. It's just not a good week. This is the week where a lot of cupcakes are scheduled. Everybody's kind of looking ahead next week to rivalry week. It just isn't one of the best weeks to bet. So I'm getting that out there now to start. With that said, I do like UCLA a lot in this one. I'll take them getting +2.5. I've been high on UCLA all year. I've been against USC all year. I'm not going to change that now. Now, yes, UCLA did get upset last week by Arizona. I think they were looking ahead to this game quite a bit in that one. What really, from an X and O standpoint, stands out to me, though, is Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Zach Charbonnet. I think their combination on the ground is going to give USC a lot of issues. USC's been terrible defensively all year, but they're really terrible against the run. So I expect them to consistently pound the rock through this one. A couple other things, too. Chip Kelly, as an underdog in conference games, 16-8 against the spread all time. I like that number. And also, the Pac-12 just always cannibalizes itself. So
it does.
I can't see any world where USC runs the table here and wins out. We saw it last week with Oregon. We saw it last week with UCLA. Maybe USC pulls this out. I don't think they do. But even if they do, I'm pounding Notre Dame next week, or I'm pounding the other team in the Pac-12 championship. I just don't see any world where USC runs the table here. I mean, not only that, but USC, I saw this stat the other day. They haven't played a top 30 team all year. No, they played 2. Excuse me, I apologize. They played 2 top 30 teams all year. They lost to Utah, and then they barely beat Oregon State. And everybody else has been just incredibly pedestrian. So I think they're going to get challenged a bit by, I guess, their rival. I mean, they're certainly rivals, but there's not a rivalry like Michigan, Ohio State, for example. Is what I'm saying by that. But the stadium is actually supposed to be pretty packed for this game, which is great because you never see the Rose Bowl packed except for during the actual Rose Bowl game. So anyway, give me UCLA +2.5 here. I would love to catch a 3. I don't think you're going to catch a 3, but I think the Bruins will win this one outright, honestly.
Yeah, we were talking earlier this week, and I just threw out there, is the Pac-12 going to be able to get 2 teams into the playoffs? And it was like, yeah. You missed the end of the Oregon game where they lost to Washington.
Right. That's right. I forgot about that.
I meant to wake up and check that, and I was like, Oregon probably won. And I went about my life, which is from Saturday night until that meeting on Monday is 100% film study. Like, I am in the dungeon watching the film, and I came up, I'm like, Oregon lost?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, and UCLA lost to Arizona, so that was. I mean, Washington's a quality team. Arizona, not so much. But
next game, Boston College getting 21 points on the road at Notre Dame. Do you trust Notre Dame here? I don't trust Notre Dame.
Hell no. Give me the points. Look, this is really simple. Let's look at Notre Dame's ATS record this year against the spread. 4-0 when they're an underdog. 1-5 when they're a favorite. And not only that, but when they're a favorite of more than 10 points, they're 0-5. Okay. So what's that tell you? They play to their competition. They've been doing this all year. They got a big dog coming in. They're the underdog. They're hyped. They're ready to go. They're going to play. We just saw last week with Navy. Navy covered easily in that game, made it. I mean, Notre Dame, the whole second half, Notre Dame was incredibly pedestrian. And then not only that, Boston College, Phil Yurkovich, Boston College quarterback, been one of the biggest disappointments this year. I really liked Phil. I thought Phil was going to have a great year. He's been very poor, honestly. But they brought in this freshman quarterback, Emmett Moorhead at BC. Looked pretty good against Duke in his first game. And then last week, man, threw for 330 yards against NC State. It was a really impressive performance. So I think with Notre Dame having USC on deck, and then also just kind of what we saw last week against Navy, I expect this to be another one where, Notre Dame will get the win, but 21 is a big number. I mean, they got to win by more than 3 touchdowns in this one. I'll definitely take that number there. I think Notre Dame can win this by 2 touchdowns, maybe 17, but BC gets the cover.
Yeah, I think that's a smart play as well. So the last one before we get to our game of the week, in air quotes, it's Ole Miss at Arkansas. So what do we got here?
Yeah, so I'm laughing at Penn State Rutgers being in your game of the week. I know we say it every week, but it's just come on, that's not a game of the week in anybody's mind except for T. Frank maybe. But anyway, all right, tough spot here for Ole Miss. That's what I see in this one. They blew a lead last week against Alabama, right? I mean, they should have beat Alabama, and now they have the Egg Bowl this upcoming Thursday. So I think this is one of those sandwich spots where it doesn't really work out too well for them. So I like Arkansas getting 2.5 here. KJ Jefferson, I forget.
Jefferson, yep.
Yes, yeah. He's missed a couple games over the last couple weeks. Sounds like he's going to be back for this one. I like that. They've also got their right tackle back, Dalton Wagner. I think that's going to be really important for Arkansas. Arkansas is a quality team. I mean, I don't put a lot of stock on what we saw against Penn State last year because Penn State's missing so many players, but I still think they're a better team than the way their season has played out. They're 5-5 right now. They got 2 winnable games here. Or I guess this is a winnable game. I think it's a winnable game to get to 7-5. And I really do think they can run the table. One other thing that stands out to me, under Sam Pittman, Arkansas is 7-0 against the spread against top 20 teams that aren't named Alabama or Georgia. So, basically the second tier of those SEC teams, when they get a shot at them, they've covered all 7 games under Pittman. So give me Arkansas plus 2.5 in this one. I just think this is going to be a dud spot for Ole Miss looking ahead to the Egg Bowl.
All right, so let's put this up one more time and give us a quick recap of what we picked here, and then we'll get to Penn State at Rutgers.
Yeah, UCLA. I mean, I don't think if UCLA doesn't lose to Arizona, they're not getting 2.5. I think they're given 1 or 2 in this game. So I think that loss last week kind of gives us some extra points here that we probably wouldn't be getting if they win that game. So give me those. I'll take the points with UCLA plus 2.5. Boston College, Notre Dame. Really simple. Notre Dame plays up to their competition. They play down to their competition. Big favorites in this one. They haven't been covering big spreads all year. I'll take the 21. And then Ole Miss, Arkansas. You got the Egg Bowl on deck for Ole Miss. Arkansas is trying to get back to a bowl game. Excuse me. They have Jefferson back in this game. They're supposed to at least. And then they have their right tackle coming back. I just think it's a really tough spot for Ole Miss, and I'll gladly take the 2.5 points. Would love to get those 2.5s to 3. And if you see it on Saturday, snatch them because then I really like those plays. But for now, I think both of those, Arkansas and UCLA, can win outright.
All right, so there you have it. Those are your best bets. Now let's get to Penn State at Rutgers. Rutgers gets 19 points in this game. I'm sorry. Yeah, they're getting 19 points in the game.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking at here?
No one's breaking this game down. I'm not breaking this game down. If we spend more than 5 minutes on this, come on. Look, it's real simple. I mean, Penn State, how many times has Penn State got the 30 this year? I mean, it's been pretty much
all but 2 games.
All but 2, right?
Yep.
So with a 20-point spread, and then they should be able to get to 30 again. The question is, does Rutgers score 10 to 14 points? I think that they can maybe get to 10, but I don't see. Do they get 2 touchdowns against Penn State's defense? I don't see
not
it.
Unless the backups come in for the whole second half, right? So if you got the third string out there, it's the ultimate backdoor cover. That's about it.
Yeah. So I think you have to pick Penn State in this one. I mean, there's parts of me that thinks maybe the over a little bit too, but I'll lay the 19. They should be able to cover this. I've hit 2 back-to-back Penn State games. Maybe we're flipping the tide on that one there, T. Frank. But I don't know. I mean, I don't really.
What's
feel
there to
confident
say
in
about
19.
this game?
Like, right? I don't. Rutgers is not good. Penn State should cover this, but they're not like Notre Dame. So Notre Dame really plays up and down. They're really Jekyll and Hyde. But Penn State's done that quite a few times, not just this year, but over the years too. So I guess play 19, but just don't bet it. Watch the first half and then move on.
So don't listen to Ryan. Watch the first half. Hang out, do some laundry, do something during the second half, but then join the BWI live post-game show directly after the game so we can talk about it and the implications of Penn State beating Rutgers. So I really need a crowd to still show up for the post-game during this game. No. It's not you. It's human nature. Like, I would go out and do whatever during the second half of that game. But it's still something that we have to examine. We have to go through the process. The 1-0 mentality, take each game and each day as it is. That's what it is. Except for this week. I'll say this right off the bat. I am not at the same level of understanding about what Rutgers is as I have been about the other opponents, because I don't hate myself and I didn't watch 14 hours of Rutgers film this week. I took a brief purview of a couple snaps of the games, and I'm also relying on some of the things I saw other teams do to Rutgers this year. So we're working from a different level of understanding, but I do think we've seen enough to talk about some of the things that make this interesting to me. Aaron Lewis is, let me give you this stat line, 33 pressures, which is a great number according to PFF, 15 quarterback hits, 1 sack. So the tackle situation, this is the first time Penn State's faced a legitimately good pass rusher that could make them pay for not having their starting unit out there. Can that happen? Can they frustrate the Penn State passing attack so it is not a 30-point win, but it's closer to that spread, right? And then on the flip side, Nick Singleton. His transformation last week and just like his personality as a football player. When I see a dude on 4th down run for a 30-yard touchdown and his celebration is beating his own helmet, like, that dude's intense. There's no let up in Nick Singleton. There's none of that happening this week. But Rutgers, sound defense, sort of. I think you can push them off the ball. I think Penn State can run the ball in this game. And then that's kind of game over when Penn State can run the football. One of the things that we saw last week against Michigan State, and this is what Fitz was talking about on the show yesterday. We had a conversation, off air. Rutgers was so bad at giving up the middle of the football field to Michigan State. And when I talked to our Rutgers beat reporter earlier this week, he said that there was an injury to the linebackers, and that was one of their worst defensive performances all season long. Are they going to allow that to happen 2 weeks in a row? Is Greg Schiano going to allow that to happen 2 weeks in a row, especially considering I think now 2 weeks in a row, the game script has been the same against Penn State now. The tight ends are a threat, and we're going to box you out of the center of the football field. So everyone is hyper aware of taking away the center of the football field. Is that going to happen? And I have a hard time when I see at least good defensive coaches and then, okay, so you're going to do that 2 weeks in a row. You're going to allow that to happen 2 weeks in a row. They may give up 400 yards, but part of my brain says they're not giving up any of those yards in the middle of the football field. But can you fix that in 1 week? Like, that's the scales, the balancing act going on in my head of like, it seems ridiculous that you would allow that to happen twice in a row, especially seeing as everyone has this book on Penn State. So it doesn't matter, though, because Penn State's going to find explosive plays no matter how they need to. You can get it in the deep passing game. You can get it in the short passing game. You can get it in the running game. You can get it in the screen game. Like, they are disciplined, but they, at least last week, and going a lot off of last week, because that's the majority of what I watched specifically for this game, is they can get into position. Whatever combination of players they have right now from last week, they can absolutely execute the defense. So you are doing you're rolling your coverage, and you're bringing a safety down into the box, and he's covering the flat. They can get there, and then somebody catches the ball in the flat, and the safety doesn't make a tackle. So great, you executed that disguise coverage perfectly, but then you didn't play football after that. That seemed to be a huge problem for them last week, and if that continues, it doesn't matter. And then defensively, Penn State is going to shut this team down. There are no weapons that I saw that are like, okay, you need to pay attention to those. And I didn't see an offensive line that's a good run blocking unit, but Penn State's going to defeat it. Like, they shut down Minnesota, who had better players. So that's not going to happen. And then to me, this is another defensive shutout potential. So I'm very bullish on the over on this one personally, or I'm on the on them covering this game. My prediction was 45-10, so that's where I guess I'm seeing this game.
Yeah, well, the over under is 45, so like that's why I was like, I kind of like the over, but when we've also seen these games over the years where Penn State puts up 28 and they kind of just cake. It's even kind of like last week against Maryland, right? Or I had the under last week, and they just kind of the whole second half was. Man,
I cannot have them put up 28 points again. I can't have Drew Aller not play, and I can't have that conversation with people again. I just don't want to do it. So they need to put up 35 in the first half so that it just makes everyone's life easier. Please. Anything else?
Take it. No, I mean, I would just say when I look at like some advanced power ratings and things like that. I mean, Rutgers' offense comes in ranked 125 in the country against Penn State's top 20 power rated defense. So I mean that's going to be massive. And really, it's just Rutgers' passing game that's been incredibly poor. They've been able to run the ball a little bit, but I think you wrote it actually in your preview this week. So did Hemby, against Maryland, and then look what happened last week. So Penn State should be able to cover this number, but it's. I've seen weirder things, for them not to cover. But in my eyes, I don't see, Penn State gets to 35. I don't see how Maryland gets to 15. So.
Yeah. That'll do it for the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll be back tomorrow. Sean Fitz is joining the postgame show. He made the editorial decision and the executive decision to not go to Rutgers, which anytime you can avoid going to New Jersey is a brilliant strategy. So he's going to be joining us on the postgame show, and we'll be bringing you live analysis and impact of what happens in Piscataway. Join us. Please come to the show. Please don't just go do yard work. It'll be dark anyway. Just hang out on the internet for a little while longer. We'll talk to you then. See ya.
So for the record, I love New Jersey.